Maya almost didn't walk in. Her hand froze on the clinic door handle as if her body itself was trying to warn her. You don't belong here. Turn around before it's too late. She could hear her mother's voice in her head. Respectable girls don't need this kind of doctor, echoing louder than the rush of traffic behind her. But the pain in her lower abdomen pulsed again, sharp and low like a buried alarm bell she couldn't ignore anymore. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, the whoosh of cold air conditioning hitting her like a slap. The clinic was quieter than she expected, almost unnervingly calm, like time had slowed just enough for her nerves to catch up with her. At 23, Maya had never visited a gynecologist. It wasn't just taboo in her household, it was shameful. She grew up learning that private things stayed private. You didn't talk about your body, you didn't touch, you didn't question, you endured. But for the past 3 months, something had changed. The cramps had gone from mild to alarming, sometimes waking her up in the middle of the night. At first, she convinced herself it was just stress. Then she tried painkillers, then herbal remedies, then prayer. But last week, she doubled over in the bathroom at work, clutching the sink to keep from collapsing. That night, she booked this appointment. In secret, deleting her browser history like she was hiding a crime. Maya Ahmed? A receptionist called out gently, snapping her back to the present. She looked up, startled, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. You're next. Dr. Essen will see you in 5 minutes. Her heart dropped. Dr. Essen. That was a man's name. She had specifically searched for a female gynecologist. But maybe he was the only one available today. Maybe she'd missed something when booking in a panic. Her throat tightened. Every cell in her body screamed to leave. She could say she felt better. She could just walk out and disappear like she'd never been here at all. But then another cramp twisted inside her, angry and unforgiving, and she knew she couldn't keep running from this. She nodded stiffly and took a clipboard with the intake form. Sitting in the corner of the waiting room, Maya filled it out with trembling fingers. Name, date of birth, symptoms, history. The questions felt invasive even on paper. She avoided eye contact with the other patients, most of whom looked relaxed, scrolling their phones or flipping through magazines. How are they so calm? She wondered. Her palms were sweating. Her foot wouldn't stop tapping. The nurse called her name again, this time directing her toward the hallway. Maya stood up slowly, knees stiff like stone. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her mind was racing with doubts. What if he asked her something she couldn't answer? What if he touched her wrong? What if he laughed at her for coming in so late? What if he saw how ashamed she felt just being here? But when she walked into the room and saw him, everything stalled. Dr. Essen was not what she expected. He stood to greet her, tall, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes behind simple glasses and a calm, deliberate presence that didn't feel threatening. Maya? He said gently, offering his hand. It's good to meet you. Please, take your time and have a seat. No pressure, no stare, no judgment. The consultation room was warm, softly lit, and smelled faintly of lavender antiseptic. There was a nurse present, a woman about Maya's age who smiled reassuringly and offered her water. Dr. Essen sat across from her, not behind a desk, not towering over her, but eye level. He didn't rush. He didn't jump into medical jargon. Instead, he asked, before we begin, is there anything you're nervous about today that I can help explain? Maya blinked. She'd braced for cold clinical authority. Instead, he was giving her control. It caught her off guard. I've never done this before, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't even tell anyone I was coming. He nodded, not surprised, not startled, just listening. That's more common than you think, he said, and I want to make sure you're comfortable with everything. Nothing happens without your permission. We can go at your pace, that word again, permission. She wasn't used to hearing it, not in relation to her own body. For the first time in months, her muscles relaxed a little. They went through her symptoms together. He asked detailed but respectful questions, explaining the medical terms in simple ways, never making her feel ignorant when it came time for the physical checkup. He paused. I'll walk you through each step before we begin, and if at any point you want to stop, we stop, deal? She nodded slowly. It wasn't easy. Her heart still pounded, but she said yes, because for once, she didn't feel like a broken thing. She felt like a person. 10 minutes later, it was over. The examination confirmed that something was there, a mass likely benign, but needing further scans. Maya sat quietly, processing the news, while Dr. Essen reassured her about next steps. We'll get you in for an ultrasound and maybe a scan. You came in at the right time. She swallowed the lump in her throat. The right time? She'd thought it was too late. She stood to leave, still dazed but steadier. As she opened the door, she heard him say one last thing. Maya. Thank you for trusting me. I know it wasn't easy. She looked back. He wasn't smiling to be polite. He meant it. And for the first time since this ordeal began, Maya realized something. She didn't regret walking through that door. There was something unusual in the way Dr. Essen looked at her chart. It wasn't rushed, like he was skimming through just another set of symptoms, nor was it cold or impersonal. He studied each detail with an attentiveness that made Maya feel seen, not just medically but as a person. She sat stiffly in the chair across from him, arms folded tightly across her stomach, still unsure if she was allowed to relax. He adjusted his glasses and glanced up with a softness in his eyes that caught her completely off guard. You've been dealing with this for several months, I see, he said, his voice calm, unhurried, and I just want to say thank you for coming in. That's a brave first step, brave. Maya blinked. No one had ever used that word for her. Not when she got top grades, not when she worked overtime to save for college, and certainly not when she quietly endured the pain that had taken root in her body like a weed. She had almost convinced herself it was all in her head until the day she collapsed at the office bathroom sink, holding her side in silent agony. Do you want a nurse to stay in the room during the exam? Dr. Essen asked gently, pulling her back to the present. She nodded quickly, and he responded with a short, understanding nod. No questions, no assumptions, just calm professionalism. A few minutes later, the female nurse returned, the same woman from earlier, whose warm smile had felt like a lifeline when Maya walked in. Dr. Essen explained the procedure in clear, non-threatening terms, making sure Maya understood what would happen before anything began. He used plain language, avoided euphemisms or clinical jargon that could confuse or embarrass her. Every few minutes he checked in. Is this okay? Do you need a break? You're in control. And each time, Maya found herself nodding, a little less tense than before. The fear was still there, but something about the quiet steadiness of his tone made her feel like she was standing on solid ground for the first time in weeks. After the exam, he asked her to wait while he reviewed the results. She sat there in the small, clean room, the paper crinkling beneath her, staring at the tiled floor as a wave of dizziness passed over her. What if it's something bad? She thought. What if it's already too late? What if the door opened softly, interrupting the storm in her mind? Dr. Essen returned with his tablet in hand, and though his expression was still composed, something had shifted in his eyes, a flicker of concern. He sat down and turned the screen toward her. There's something here I want to keep an eye on, he said carefully. It appears there's a small mass in your lower abdomen. It may be benign, but I'd recommend an ultrasound to get a better look, possibly a biopsy afterward, depending on what we see. Maya's breath caught. Her vision blurred slightly, the word mass ringing in her ears. Is it dangerous? She asked, her voice barely audible. We don't jump to conclusions, he said gently. You came in at the right time. That matters a lot. He paused for a moment, watching her closely as if trying to read not just her reaction, but her fear. Then he added something that changed the entire room. Maya. You don't have to answer this, but can I ask, is there a reason it took you a while to come in? She stared at him, surprised by the question and even more by the lack of judgment behind it. Just curiosity, just concern, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her defenses cracked. I guess I was ashamed, she said. Growing up, this stuff, it was always taboo. We didn't talk about it. We didn't go to doctors unless we were dying, and a gynecologist. That was, I don't know, off limits. Dr. Essen nodded slowly, then leaned back in his chair with a distant look in his eyes. I understand more than you might think, he said. My sister, Nadia. She was like you, quiet, private. She had symptoms too. She didn't tell anyone until it got bad. By the time she came to the hospital, it was already stage 3. The room felt suddenly heavier. Maya swallowed. Did she? He gave a sad smile. She passed. She was 24. Maya froze, unsure what to say. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was sacred, a shared space of grief and understanding. I promised her, he continued quietly, that I'd become the kind of doctor who listened, not just to pain but to silence, that I'd never let another girl go unseen the way she did. Maya felt her throat tighten. Something about his words, the honesty, the sorrow, the quiet fire behind them made her chest take. She had come here expecting cold stethoscopes, distant conversation, maybe even humiliation. Instead, she found this, a man who carried his sister's memory in every patient he treated. A doctor who saw her not just as a case file, but as someone whose fear mattered. She looked at him, blinking back tears. "I'm sorry about your sister," she whispered. "I think she'd be proud of you." Dr. Essen nodded, his voice steady. "Let's focus on your care now. We'll schedule the ultrasound as soon as possible. And Maya, whatever happens, you're not alone in this." She nodded slowly, a strange calm beginning to settle in her chest. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was floating alone in a storm. She felt anchored, seen, respected, and maybe just maybe strong enough to face whatever came next. Maya sat on the edge of the exam table, her palms damp against the crinkled paper sheet, trying to steady her breathing as the sound of Dr. Essen's keyboard clicks filled the room. The nurse had stepped out a few minutes ago, giving them privacy. As he reviewed the images from her ultrasound, on the monitor, a grainy black and white scan flickered in front of him. Maya couldn't decipher what any of it meant, just blurry shapes and numbers that might as well have been written in another language. But she didn't need to understand the scan to feel the tension in the room shift. She saw the way Dr. Essen leaned forward, his brow furrowing slightly as he clicked and zoomed. His silence was careful, not dismissive, but concentrated. And then he sighed, quietly, almost regretfully. Maya's stomach turned before he even said a word. He turned to her, and this time, his voice didn't carry the professional rhythm he'd used earlier. It was slower now, more careful. "Maya," he said, gently closing the laptop as though shielding her from something. "I want to talk to you not just as your doctor, but as someone who's been exactly where you are." Her heart skipped. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice small. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a drawer at his side and pulled out a worn photo. The corners were bent from age. He held it carefully, like it was something fragile. "This is my sister, Nadia." Maya leaned forward slightly and saw a girl not much older than her, hospital gown, tired eyes, a weak smile that looked like it took effort. "She was 24 when this was taken," he said. "Just a year older than you." Maya swallowed hard. There was a heaviness in the air that made her feel like she had stepped into someone else's memory. "She had symptoms," he continued, eyes still on the photo, pain, bleeding, but she was too shy to say anything. She told herself it would go away, that it was normal, that maybe it was her fault. His voice cracked, just slightly. She waited too long. By the time she came in, the cancer had already spread. Maya didn't know what to say. She looked at the photo again and suddenly felt like she wasn't alone in the room anymore. Nadia was there. Her silence, her fear, her regret, all of it hung between them. "That's why I do this," Dr. Essen said. "Why I became a gynecologist. Because I couldn't save her, but I can fight for girls like her. Like you." Maya felt a lump form in her throat, hot and heavy. She thought she'd come here just to get a checkup, maybe some pills, a diagnosis. She hadn't expected this, a doctor who didn't just treat symptoms, but carried a ghost in his heart and used it as a compass. "So what did you see on my scan?" she asked, her voice barely holding together. Dr. Essen exhaled slowly. "There's a mass," he said, not hiding it, not softening the truth, but not letting it land like a death sentence either. "It's small, it doesn't look aggressive, but it's there, and we need to find out what it is. Next step is a biopsy that'll tell us exactly what we're dealing with." Maya closed her eyes, nodding. 1,000 thoughts crashed into each other in her mind. What if it's cancer? What if it's nothing? What if this changes everything? What if I never came in at all? And yet, in the middle of her panic, she also felt something else, something new. Strength, not loud. Not blazing, but steady. The kind of strength that came from being seen, from knowing she wasn't just a name on a chart. From realizing that behind the white coat and calm voice, her doctor wasn't just a man with answers, he was a brother who had lost something and vowed never to lose it again. "Thank you," she whispered. Dr. Essen looked up, surprised. For what? For telling me, she said. For not treating me like I'm stupid or overreacting. For being human. He gave her a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes but was genuine nonetheless. You don't need to thank me, Maya. You showed up today. That takes guts. Most people don't. She glanced down at her hands, still trembling. I almost didn't. I almost turned back at the door. But you didn't, he said. And that decision might have saved your life. The weight of that hit her like a slow, steady wave. She remembered standing on the curb that morning, staring at the clinic sign, convincing herself she wasn't ready, that she didn't belong here, that maybe it was all in her head. And now, here she was staring at a mass on a scan, holding back tears while a stranger told her she was brave. The irony wasn't lost on her. She stood up slowly, her legs still unsteady. When will the biopsy be? As soon as possible, he said. We'll fast-track it. I'll have my staff call you with the details, but I'll personally follow up. You won't be left wondering, I promise. She looked at him one last time before walking to the door. If your sister were here, I think she'd be proud of you too. He didn't answer right away, just nodded, eyes lowered, hands still resting on that photo. And as Maya stepped out into the hallway, heart heavy but strangely light, she realized something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. The days after the ultrasound were the slowest Maya had ever lived through. Each hour stretched long and fragile, like a thread pulled too tight, threatening to snap at the smallest tug of bad news. She went to work, smiled through meetings, answered emails, but her mind was never really present. It stayed locked in a sterile hospital corridor, standing outside a door with her name on a chart and something unknown growing inside her. The appointment for her biopsy came faster than expected. Dr. Essen's team had kept their word: no delays, no red tape, no forgotten calls. Even then, Maya felt herself sinking into old fears the night before the procedure. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark, counting her breaths, her mind conjuring every worst-case scenario. But the next morning, when she walked into the clinic again, something had shifted. She still felt nervous, her hands still trembled, but there was also a thread of trust running through the fear now. She knew she wasn't walking into that room alone. Dr. Essen greeted her like he had before, calm, warm, not over-friendly but not distant either, professional but human. The nurse who prepped her remembered her name. Even the receptionist smiled like they'd all been quietly rooting for her since day one. During the biopsy, Dr. Essen explained every single step before he moved. You'll feel some pressure now. Count to 5 with me. This part will be over before you realize. And it was, not painless, but not unbearable, not terrifying, because she was no longer in the dark. Afterward, she rested in recovery, quietly staring out the window, feeling a strange weight lift from her shoulders. Not because the journey was over, it wasn't, but because for once in her life, she had chosen herself, she had faced the thing that scared her most, and even if the results were bad, she would know, she would act, she would not stay silent. The next 3 days were the worst. Waiting is a cruel kind of torture, especially when your imagination won't stop whispering disaster into your ear. Maya tried to keep herself busy. She went on walks. She journaled. She called her friend from college and talked about nothing important, just to hear another voice. But when the clinic number flashed on her phone on the 4th day, her breath hitched mid-sentence. She stepped outside and answered with a trembling hello. It was Dr. Essen himself, not a nurse, not an automated message. Maya, he said gently, I wanted to call you myself. Your biopsy results just came in. She closed her eyes, bracing for impact. The mass is benign. It's not cancer. It will need treatment. Yes, but it's fully manageable. You're going to be okay. The tears didn't come right away. It was as if her brain had to translate the sentence 5 different ways before she believed it. Not cancer, benign, treatable. You're going to be okay. She sat down on the edge of her porch step, the phone pressed tight against her ear. And then, finally, the tears came, hot, shaking sobs not of grief, but of relief, of gratitude, of release. She didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did he. There was just silence, but it wasn't empty. It was sacred. Thank you, she whispered finally. You don't even know what this means to me. I think I do, he replied softly. She went in the next day for a follow-up, the final appointment in what had become the most unexpected journey of her adult life. When she entered the room this time, she didn't clutch her file like armor. She didn't avoid eye contact. She sat down calmly, as if she belonged. Because she did, Dr. Essen explained the treatment plan in simple terms: minor outpatient surgery to remove the mass, followed by checkups every few months. Nothing invasive, nothing threatening, just a plan, a path forward. It's good. You came when you did, he said. Had you waited 6 months longer, this would have been a very different conversation. She nodded slowly. That sentence stayed with her like an echo. Not haunting but awakening. Had you waited? She almost had, but she didn't, and that made all the difference. As she stood to leave, something inside her wouldn't let her just walk out. She turned back to face him one more time, her voice steady but full. You didn't just help me heal, she said. You helped me find my voice. Dr. Essen looked at her for a long moment, something proud and sorrowful in his eyes all at once. And now that you have it, he said, never let anyone silence it again. Maya walked out into the sunlight with that line echoing in her chest. She thought about all the years she'd been told to stay quiet, all the times she doubted her own instincts, all the warnings and whispers and silences that had wrapped around her like chains. And now they were falling away one link at a time. Her voice was no longer just a whisper inside her head. It was real, it was loud, and it was finally hers. 6 months had passed since Maya last stepped into Dr. Essen's clinic, but the memory of those weeks still lived in her bones like a quiet storm that had come and gone, leaving everything changed in its wake. The surgery had been successful. The follow-up visits, clean. Her body had healed, but something deeper had shifted to something more permanent. Where there had once been silence, there was now sound. Where shame once lived, pride had taken root. She had gone from hiding her pain to standing fully inside her truth, and that transformation had taken her somewhere she never thought she'd be, a stage. Tonight, Maya stood in front of a crowd of over 100 women, their eyes fixed on her as the microphone trembled slightly in her hand. Behind her, a banner read Women's Health Matters, Stories That Heal. She had been invited as a guest speaker not because she was a celebrity or an expert, but because she had lived through something most women in the room were still too afraid to name. She glanced down at the note cards in her hand, filled with bullet points she'd carefully prepared, then slowly lowered them. Her heart beat faster, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was clear. 6 months ago, I was too shy to say the word checkup. I was scared, ashamed, and convinced that going to a gynecologist was something people like me just didn't do. A few women in the front row nodded. Others looked away, as if her words had cracked something they weren't ready to face. But then, Maya continued, I met a doctor who didn't treat me like a case file. He didn't make me feel small for waiting too long. He didn't rush through my symptoms or use words I couldn't understand. He looked me in the eye and listened. Not just to what I said, but to everything I was too afraid to say. Her hands were no longer shaking. And when he found something in my scan, he didn't hide behind big words or false comfort. He told me the truth, gently, but clearly. And then he walked me through every step: biopsy, surgery, recovery, like it wasn't just my body on the line, but my voice, my dignity, my story. She took a breath and scanned the room. And now, I stand here not because I'm special, but because I was lucky enough to be seen by someone who was no ordinary gynecologist. Someone who became a doctor not just to treat bodies but to protect voices. Someone who once lost a sister and chose to honor her by making sure no other woman ever felt that kind of alone again. In the crowd, near the back of the room, Dr. Essen sat quietly, arms folded, expression unreadable. He hadn't told Maya he was coming. He didn't need recognition. He didn't come for applause. But when she locked eyes with him for a moment, something in her face softened. She didn't cry. She didn't pause. She just smiled, like one survivor thanking another. We live in a world where women are still taught to whisper their pain, she continued, to wait, to downplay, to smile through it. But I'm here to say, you don't have to. You don't have to wait until it's unbearable. You don't have to apologize for caring about your health. You don't have to be silent anymore. The applause started slow, just one or two claps, then swelled into something thunderous, rising like a wave that washed over her. Maya stood still, tears brimming in her eyes, not from sadness, but from something purer, clarity, purpose. She stepped down from the stage as the next speaker prepared to go up. As she moved through the crowd, several women stopped her, some to hug her, others to thank her, a few just to squeeze her hand and say nothing. But it was when she stepped outside into the cool evening air that she saw him leaning against the railing, watching the city lights flicker across the glass buildings. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said. Dr. Essen turned, a faint smile on his lips. "Didn't want to make you nervous." She laughed, and for a moment, they both stood in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just full. "I meant every word," she said. "About you, about Nadia." He looked away briefly, then nodded. "You honored her more than I ever could tonight." Maya stepped beside him, looking out over the crowd of women still filtering out of the hall. "Do you ever think about her? When you're with patients?" "Every day," he said softly. "She's in every decision I make. Every moment I pause before speaking. Every girl who walks in scared. She's there." Maya nodded. Then maybe she didn't leave. Not really. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Just stood there, side by side, two people brought together by pain, by healing, and by the strange, quiet power of empathy. And as Maya walked away that night, head held high, she knew her life had taken a turn long before the scan, long before the biopsy. It changed the moment someone chose to see her fully, patiently, and without judgment. And that someone was no ordinary gynecologist. He was a quiet warrior, fighting silence with compassion, one patient at a time.